I'm Allie. Join me as I show you how to create a bezel around a pear drop Rivoli. This is kind of a little secret trick so you don't have to get the fit exactly right. If you need any materials, go ahead and look below the video in the description to get links to shop with us online. Gather up all your supplies and let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to do to encapsulate our crystal is actually use one of these settings for these Potomac crystal pearl drops. We're going to use the settings to hold the prongs, and then we're going to do kind of a seed beaded bezel. But the nice thing with this is you see the full crystal and you get that nice little prong set. So we don't lose any of the crystal or any of the color, and that's why we're using the little channel here. You can see you'll see some thread in the back. You can cover that up with some beads if you like, and then attach it however you want to the top. The first thing we're going to do is take this 13 by 18 millimeter crystal, and we're going to put it into the setting. So to put it into the setting, you'll notice that there's holes along the back here, and you just kind of want to drop it straight down in. You can kind of move it a couple different places and just make sure that it's sitting nice and even in there. And then I'm going to suggest that you use your nylon jaw pliers. If you use your nylon jaw pliers, that's going to be nicer because it's not going to scratch up your crystal. You're going to drop one prong down, then another prong, going around in a circle here. And then once you're done with all the prongs, go back to the beginning and then really press these down nice and hard. So you make sure that all of your prongs are down and in place. From here, if you want to, you could attach it just like it is to a pendant, come up with wire if you wanted to. But what we're going to do is give it that faux seed bead look, like it would be bezeled in, but again, we're not losing any of the shape or any of the size of the stone. After getting your prongs done, I'm going to take an 11/0 seed bead, and I've made a stop bead on my green DragonThread size 6. I'm going to begin at the bottom and go into the bottom of the setting here, sewing through the first hole. You'll see holes towards the top and holes towards the bottom. And I'm going to sew through the first hole right here along, and that stop bead's just going to kind of go inside there. This stop bead may stay in there and never come out. What we're going to do now is line the side of our piece here with our 11/0 seed beads. I have a total of 7 seed beads that need to go on here, and these are 10 11/0 Miyuki seed beads, and I'm going to go from the bottom hole to the top hole and go straight across from one hole to the other. And what that's going to do then is put these 11/0s right along the exterior there. Same thing here along this side. We're going to repeat and do 7 beads. And once those 7 beads are on, we're going to go back to that bottom hole and we're going to string and go the whole way straight across. Try not to sew through your stop bead, but if your stop bead's going to stay on there, it really doesn't matter. Now, you do see a little bit of thread in the back. If you do not want to see the thread, you can always put seed beads in there as well. From here, I am going to put some seed beads to the top and some seed beads to the bottom. Prior to doing so, I want you to take your thread and needle back through that first set of 7 beads. These beads, which are our largest of our seed beads that we're using, are going to line the whole back of the piece, and then we're going to downgrade to Delicas as we go forward. From here, we are going to, once again, put on more 11/0 seed beads, and have 7, 8, and 9 seed beads. Going over then to the opposite side, we're going to go through the 7 that lay on the left side. These 9 will just wrap across the top there. Going into the bottom here. Then work down that whole side of the 7. And what we're doing is we are getting the seed beads so they're wrapping the whole way around the piece. So if you are using a Toho brand seed bead, you may need a couple less beads. If you're using an off brand, you may need a couple more. So you just want to try to see exactly what your count is as you go around. So here on the bottom, I have my 5, 10, 11, and 12 beads. And then once again, I'm going to go up through those original 7 beads. And if you try your 12 and it's not quite big enough that you still see a bunch of thread, just add a couple extra beads to that. So once again, I did 7, then 9, 7, and 12 along the bottom here. I'm just going to give a nice tight pull to pull those seed beads in a little bit further. I'm going to go the whole way to the top of the design here. And when I get to the top, right there, I'm going to add one more seed bead just to be a little peak. Coming down the other side then, we're going to fill that in just so it has a little tiny point there. Now you'll notice I didn't really pay attention to where I'm coming out of. I'm somewhere in the middle of those 7 beads, and we're going to start some peyote stitch. We are going to do a row of peyote stitch with our 11-0 seed beads, and then we're going to switch over to our 11-0 delicas, and then we're going to wrap it up with some 15-0 delicas. To do the peyote stitch, we have our thread and needle coming out, one of our 11-0s already there. We're going to add another 11-0, skip the next one in line, and go through bead number 3. When I pull, I want to make sure that bead that I just added goes towards the top of the setting. Once again, add a bead, skip number 4, sew through bead number 5. And this is going to continue the whole way around. So you're going to notice that the beads kind of want to fold to the outside. Don't worry about that. Just have them that we're lining them up right in a row. As you come back around and finish up this first row of peyote, like I said, you'll see that most of the beads are kind of sitting to the outside or kind of sitting up. What we're going to do is step up. So we are going to step up and go from the 11-0 seed beads to the 11-0 Delica beads. We're coming out of the first 11-0 that we were coming out of when we added our first 11-0 to our second row, which is actually the third row of peyote stitch. And we're going to go into that first bead and we're going to continue around. As we continue around, because we're using a smaller bead than the 11-0, the Delicas are slightly smaller, that's going to pull it in towards the center. So you're going to add a Delica, then you're going to sew through the next 11-0 seed bead that was added to the outside. Like I said, right away, you're going to notice how that's getting pulled in towards the center of the pendant. Adding a bead, sewing through the next one that's sitting up from the peyote row that we just added, going around. Continue around, adding in all of those Delica 11-0s between our 11-0 seed beads that we just added in the previous row. As you get ready to finish here, that first wrap of our 11-0s, you can see how it's pulling to get it in, but it's not quite tight around your bezel. You're going to step up here again, going back through your first 11-0 seed bead, and then also through the first Delica bead that you put on. We're going to do another row of peyote stitch, this time with another row of our 11-0 Delicas. One 11-0 Delica goes on, and then you're going to pick up the next Delica in line there. And this is going to pull it even closer. The reason being is because the 11-0 Delicas that we're catching on to are smaller than the 11-0s that were below it. So it makes sense. So we're going to do one more row here of our 11-0 Delicas. And then we're going to go even smaller and get into our 15s. So once again, go the whole way around here, adding in your new 11-0 Delica and sew in to the previous one from the row below it that we just finished. Adding a Delica, sewing in to the next Delica below. You can see how that's starting to pull that in, and you can see the peyote starting to take shape there really, really well, and how you're getting that nice tight bezel around the outer edge. So one more row here of our 11s, and then we're going to switch to our row of our 15s. Once you have that nice section of the 2 rows of gold, or champagne rather, you're going to now go in, step up to that last bead that your thread was coming out of, and now we're going to make it even tighter. We're going with a row of 15-0 Delica beads. So we're switching from 11-0s to 15-0s, and that's just going to make this a lot tighter, finishing up that bezel and making it so that way it's going to fit nicely around the form of the preconditioned bezel that we used. And this is great because we don't have to bezel the back. We also know that our piece is going to stay in place because of the prongs. And also we don't lose any of the shape of our crystal because we don't have to put a ton of seed beads around the outer edge. So it's kind of that nice faux cheat. There's also different shapes of the bezels. If you're looking and you're saying, oh, I'd really love to do this with a Rivoli, or I'd really love to do this with an oval, go ahead and check out some of those other shapes as well. Now here at the top I am going to sew straight through. So I'm not going to add any beads there. I'm going to step up to the top 11-0 that's already there. And then I'm going to come down through the next one. And what that's going to do is still maintain that nice point of this drop. In goes a Delica, and then continuing on the whole way around the shape. So as we finish up then, we get that nice faux bezel look with very, very little effort. So I have a couple more stitches to do here, adding in my 15-0s. And if you don't have 15-0 Delicas, you can certainly just use 15-0 beads. That's fine too. And then the last thing is to decide how you want to do the bail. So do you want a bail that is kind of hidden and it looks like it's attached directly to the chain? Or do you want a bail that actually has seed beads to it? I'm going to do a hidden bail, meaning I'm going to attach it directly to my piece of my chain. Once you're done here, go ahead and just go back through a couple of your Delica beads, both the 15s and the 11s in the stitch, and you can see kind of just that nice tight look of that faux bezel that happened along the side of the piece. From here, we're going to get back to the top. So we're just going to sew along that last row that you just did, making sure you don't miss any beads because then it'll kind of sit funky. And we're going to pull that row a little bit tighter to get that design. Just weaving in and out. And you can see I kind of wiggle my needle, making sure that I'm getting to all those beads. And where I want to come out is that top gold bead. I want to come out through the pink bead right behind it. So I'm going to take my thread and needle and get back to there because that is my center point. Now, if you notice that you have your bezel that is maybe coming forward or backwards a little bit, you can always sew down further into the peyote and just attach it by sewing through the back 1 or 2 more times. But it is stable and it will stay there in the design as you're looking and working through that nice peyote look. So the way that I've attached it here to the top is just adding one little 11-0 and sewing it right directly onto my chain to do that nice Y design with just a little crystal on the side to add some extra bling. So I have my thread and needle here, and I'm going to get the end of my chain. And if you want to do this, that you don't want to make the Y, you can certainly attach it to a jump ring or a chain like that. I'm going to add it to the bottom of the Y. So I'm going into the last piece of chain. When you go into the last piece of chain, just make sure as you're looking at it that if you want to, you can certainly add a wire guard as well. Actually, we'll do a wire guard for this one. I'll grab one out. But you want to make sure that you don't have any cuts in this last link of chain, that it is definitely soldered shut. So instead on this one, I will put, just so you can see the difference, my little jump ring or my little wire guard here. The wire guard, I'm going to sew through it. Remember, I'm coming out of that top pink bead. I'm going to put the wire guard on. So down through the wire guard on the opposite side. If you're putting this into a soldered chain, which I would suggest if you're using a chain, you're going to do that now, sewing that in so that way it hangs out in the center of your wire guard. My thread's currently coming out the left-hand side of that pink bead. I'm going to sew into the right-hand side of that pink bead, and that's going to make it sit even on top of the piece. We're going to reinforce that going in up through the wire guard or directly through the chain if you were stringing directly through the chain that you didn't want it to look like it was separated, down through the wire guard on the opposite side, and once again through that pink bead. From here, I'm going to sew down through the piece. And the way that I'm going to sew down through the piece is just going down through the sides towards the back, pulling in my needle and thread, and I'm going to get down to where my stop bead is, and I'm going to sew back around there where my stop bead is, and I'm going to tie those 2 thread ends together. So I'm just zigzagging back and forth, and instead of really going back and forth, I'm going to come out here where I can see my hole, go down through one more bead, one there, and then I'm going to bring my thread, through my setting. I'm going to take my needle and thread, go through the setting there, out through the other side of that setting. And notice how I'm just kind of poking my needle through. Doesn't really matter where. I'm going to bring it back down here towards the setting. just like I did along the front, kind of taking my needle and pushing it back through different sections, staying on that same thread line. And then once I get back towards that starter thread, I'm going to take my needle and thread through the opening there, along the back. I'm not even going to worry about the stop bead that's there. I'm just going to go right in here, take those 2 thread ends, and tie them together. That stop bead will be forever hidden inside the piece. Give that nice tight pull. Grab your thread burner or your thread zap. Burn down the extra thread. Again, this thin green dragon thread, I'm not going to see any of that extra thread anyway. I'm just going to burn that down towards the back of the piece. From here, I'll go in if I want to and add a little bead further up. Or what I can do is just have my Y chain coming down and then attach more chain further up with that nice chain look effect. To attach the chain then, if you want to kind of get that chain look, I just have some 24 gauge wire here, and I'm going to go in and make my coiled loops. And I've attached some metallic gold crystals, and I'm just going to put my loop through the chain. If you need help with making this Y and adding the wire and everything a little bit slower, I have plenty of videos on how to do these coiled eye pins, they're called. I'm going to do 3 coils. Go ahead and cut off that extra wire. Grab on a crystal with that pink seed bead to kind of tie it together on either side. And then once I get into the top here, same thing, I'm going to make that coiled loop. And I'm going to go into that and put 2 pieces of chain. And then I'm going to do another coiled loop at the top, add another one. So I'm creating that Y look, making sure that last link of chain, just like when we put the wire guard in, that it is not cut at all. Taking that wire around once, twice, 3 times, cutting off that extra, and I'll do that same thing of the coiled links above to give that nice Y a little bit more drama towards the front. Adding in some seed bead or some crystals further up in the design as well, and bringing the chain further down so it hangs as this nice long faux bezeled drop. Thanks so much for joining me and creating that nice faux pear drop bezel. Remember, you can do this with other shapes as well. So if you happen to do it with another one of the settings, let us know in the comments so that way you can give counts and information to other people that may be watching, other Potomac beaders in this community. As always, if you need any supplies, look below the video in the description. We'll put links there to the site that you can shop with us online. Don't forget, if you haven't yet, subscribe so you don't miss anything from us here at PotomacBeads. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you learned a little trick, and stay tuned for our next inspirational video.